All right. With caution, the young woman guided the submarine down into the depths of Aquarion, where fearful creatures lurked. Massive sharks cruised by, and the mysterious bonefish, aquatic cousins of the skelegon, would sometimes bump into the sides of the hull, making it squeal as their bones drug across the metal. Pressing a few buttons on a screen, she brought the submarine down to rest on the ocean floor next to a wall of glittering magic. At the airlock, she punched in a code, extending a tube through the magic, allowing her to walk into the cave. Her dark cloak covered her face in a deep shadow, but the sleeves were short enough to reveal her soft, slender hands. "Carta, are you here?" she asked, taking a few steps into the cave, listening for any sign of the woman she called for over the echoing water drips. "Yes, I am here," came the sumptuous reply. Cautiously, she stepped through the darkness until she entered a wider area. A pot of blue-gray potion spilled over the sides of a cauldron, dripping down into the green fire that burned below. The woman smiled, remembering when she first came here long ago. The woman jumped as a plume of violet smoke swirled before her, revealing a tall, opulent woman as it died away. Her soft, long violet hair tickled the ground, covering one of her dark eyes, softly cascading down her back, gracing her ashen skin while a large black shell held her hair. What is a large shell? We'll do that, and then we'll just dismiss this, because, it's basically, think of it kind of like a shell that maybe what are they called? A hermit crab would use. But think of it like just big enough so that you can actually wear it like a hat. That's how big this thing is. Okay, okay. Her tight skirt hung low around her hips, reaching to the floor with slits running up either side, allowing the entirety of her toned legs to show with each captivating step she took. Now, let's get rid of this. The smoke settled around her chest, dying away with a revealing half-bodice. "Ah, so you've come to visit at last. What is it you seek?" Carta asked with an unsettlingly enticing tone as she walked towards the woman, setting her black finger-tipped hand on her shoulder. "Have you come to ascertain what will happen to your love?" Carta inquired, circling her and placing her other hand on the woman's shoulder, murmuring in her ear. "We both know what his fate shall be." "We both know what his fate shall be," the woman replied. Oh, right, I forgot. I gotta read a little bit further so I can actually do the voice properly. "We both know what his fate shall be," the woman replied, a slight pain hanging in her words. "Or have you come to see what will happen to you?" Oh, wait. "Or have you come to see what will happen to you?" Carter whispered, standing to her full height, nearly a foot taller than the woman, putting her attractive hands atop her hips. "Don't mock me, Carter. I haven't the time, nor do you, seeing as you are using your mana doll," the woman snapped, seeming agitated or desperate. Carter walked to her cauldron, dipping her finger into the pot and licking the potion off with a flirty smile. "Then do us both a favor. Don't make me drag your question out of you. You always were a bit of a tease," Carter smiled. The woman sighed and held out her hand with the ingredients Carter would need. "I see. What do you want to know?" Carta asked, as she dropped each of the herbs into a smaller pot of salt water next to the pot of potion. I want to know if you feel or see what will become of Osiria. Carta dropped her head to the side, her eyes almost laughing as her hair draped over her shoulder. Now, you and Reen said that what I can see is only a possible future. You should remember that, she said with an almost condescending tone. With a final flick of her wrist, she dropped the last herbs in and began watching the water swirl. She stirred the pot and watched as images passed before her, the woman waiting in anticipation. Tell me, have the people accepted what happened? Carta asked as she continued to stir, waiting for the images in the pot to stabilize. There are no longer any people left from that time. I would have come to you sooner and told you, but circumstances prevented me from doing so, the woman replied, stepping closer to the light from the green flames under the cauldron. I see, Carta sighed, watching the waters as an image began forming. The waters tell of two possibilities, neither of which has a joyous air. The woman lowered her head slightly before motioning with her hand to continue. The first is that the Guardians will fail, all 6 having their lives ended as they are going to deliver the final blow. Carta was flung back from something hitting her in the head, casting her into the wall before dropping to the ground. Carta! The woman cried, about to come to her aid when Carta held up her hand. I'm all right. Whatever was going to happen, I couldn't see beyond the final blow. Carta stood and peered into the pot as a tear fell down her cheek. The second is that the Guardians will succeed, but many lives will be lost in the battle, and the happiness it would have brought will be tainted. One of them will die, and it just may break the Guardians. Whoops. One of them will die, and it just may break the Guardians. But Carta seemed to choke on her words as the images passed before her. What is it? The woman urged as Carta seemed to be more panicked. You will pay a steep price to keep the Guardians from breaking. Carta cried. The woman nodded and turned away, saddened by the news. Ice Dancer, please, don't do it. Don't leave me here alone, Carta said, almost seeming desperate as she walked up to her and threw her arms tightly around the woman's shoulders. The woman stopped and placed her hand on Carta's as a strand of golden hair fell from under the hood into the dull light of the fire. I do not doubt in my mind that the Guardians will succeed, but I can't let their victory be a milestone of grief. No, you can't leave me here all alone, not again, Carta begged, clinging tighter to Ice Dancer, who smiled and squeezed her hands. I'm sorry you have been here all alone for so long, but you needn't worry about the people of Osiria any longer. You can come out into the light, where you belong. You can't leave me here by myself. I would confide in Reen, but she has disappeared, and Chorus is no longer redeemable. Don't leave me, Carta begged one final time. Ice Dancer struggled to hold back her tears as she spoke. I'm sorry, Windharp, but I must. Thank you as always, my sister. Okay. So we got that out of the way. It was just kind of the prologue there for the story. It's that is kind of referring to more so a larger mythology in the entirety of Maplestory the Novel Guardians, or Maplestory the Novel, at least that has to do with Guardians and what will eventually be Raven's War. So in the future, there will be a kind of a 1.5 chapter that will explain why Carta is down here, and at least further explain as to what's happening here in the thing, what she's referring to when she says, you know, why am I down here, you know, all that kind of good stuff. So, yeah. All right. So, then Chapter 1. Tainted Herbs. The Black Mage walked through the halls of the main castle, stopping occasionally to see the faces of students the Black Wings had recruited. As he wandered, Dragon and Eleanor melted into existence from the shadows and fell in step to give her report of Urgoth's actions. Wait. Dragon... Shadows. And fell in step. Okay. Fell in step as Eleanor gave her report of Urgoth's actions. The Chief Memory Knights report no unusual activity within Edelstein. The Wyverns report that Dragon Noir hasn't been seen or heard from since his defeat by Oz, the Blazed Wizard Chief, and our contingent... Oh, okay. I see. I missed a comment there. The Wyverns report that Dragon Noir hasn't been seen or heard from since his defeat by Oz, the Blaze Wizard Chief, and our contingency plan is progressing smoothly. Man, I am, like, really, really thirsty. Of course, I also did just finish dinner, so yeah. There is that. Ah. All right. Okay, so why are you upset? That's probably... Okay, so I did actually go through this once already, but I'm going through it with you guys, so that way it's all, like, you know, you guys can be in on the story as we go. The Black Mage nodded as they walked to the dungeon. On either side of the main walkway, quiet cells housed skeletons of dead soldiers or unyielding recruits, their flesh melted away by the thick miasma hanging in the air. Coming to one of the cells, the Black Mage looked inside, narrowing his eyes as he looked at a man with charcoal-colored skin, sitting with legs crossed and hands folded, touching the tips of his thumbs together. Okay, let's see. Let's try this instead, as though meditating. There we go, that's a little better. When one is brought somewhere against their will. As thought as though. Okay. When one is brought somewhere against their will, it is hardly a summons. You have no honor, Black Mage, the man said, keeping his eyes closed mostly to not let his fear be exposed. Okay. Primarily so as not to let his fear be exposed. Okay. That works a little better. The mage's eyes disappeared as he shut them and breathed a long, self-restraining breath. Whispers weaving their presence into the air. The man unfolded his legs, shifting to his knees while keeping his hands folded. If I knew why you brought me here, there would be no reason for my being in your dungeon, would there? The man replied, still keeping his eyes shut. Do you have a home within the gardens of Herbtown? Eleanor asked, crossing her arms and shifting her weight to one leg. The man met Eleanor's gaze for a moment, then casually turned his eyes to the black mage and nodded. I have. What of it? The mage opened the door and silently walked in, holding out a small vial with a clear substance. What am I to do with this? The man asked, taking the vial and looking over the liquid within, almost feeling thousands of tiny presences. Thousands of tiny presences. Whispers surrounded him as the black mage held out his hand, bringing up an... I forgot to do that. Okay, give me a second here. There we go. Do this. Here we go. The man asked, taking the vial and looking over the liquid within, feeling thousands of tiny presences. Whispers surrounded him as the black mage held out his hand, bringing up an image of herbs and tonics stored throughout Herbtown. The man smirked as he tucked the small vial in his sleeve and reached for his hat. When whispers filled his ears once more. Defeat the Guardians? Why would I want to do that? He asked, until the black mage produced a badge adorned with a tiny gold insignia that would Okay. Let's see. Identifying. Okay. He asked, until the black mage produced a badge adorned with a tiny gold insignia, identifying him as an elite within the mage's inner circle, a general of the Black Wings. The man smirked as he slowly opened his eyes and reached for his bamboo sword. And a scroll. Okay. There we go. That's better. And if I fail in defeating them? The three visiting him stared hard, the black mage's eyes narrowing as he left the cell, making the air cold and stale. The man nodded his understanding, leaving the dungeon for Herbtown. Do you think he will succeed? Eleanor asked with a mocking smirk. The black mage growled in his throat as he left the dungeon, making Eleanor and Dragon chuff in stunned awe. He doesn't care about anyone, does he? Dragon asked, the comment making Eleanor lower her brow in thought. How long before the black mage sent her on a mission she would likely never return from? How much usefulness did she still provide her master, and how long would that last? Okay, so, got kind of the opening scene out of the way. So now, let's get on to the main story. Careful, Jen. Remember what happened last time? Jack mumbled. It's coming out, like it or not, Jenny growled, brushing the hair out of her face, damp from her sweating forehead. I'm almost done. Just keep holding it. It's too much. I gotta take it out, Jenny hissed back. No, leave it in. I'm almost here. Too bad. It's coming out. Jenny closed her eyes and grabbed the small reactor, yanking it from the circuit board. After a few moments, the lights and processes within the Beyond the Clouds cannon shut down. Hey guys, what's up? Called Antonia, making Jenny jump and accidentally touch the contacts of the reactor to the circuits, fusing it to the board in a shower of sparks, sounding like it was overloading. Antonia! What did I say about sneaking up on us like that? Jack hollered. Sorry, I thought you guys were done. Jack shook his head and pulled Jenny to her feet, running as fast as they could away from the machine until a plume of blue fire erupted into the sky. Jack coughed hard, pulling his face out of the dirt and shaking his head to get the pebbles out of his hair. "Next time, wait until you see us away from one of these things," Jack said between heaves. Olson and Ozzy appeared, running to them after they dispatched another cannon. "You guys all right?" Ozzy asked, pulling Jenny and Antonia. Tonia. Right? Antonia. Okay, yeah. Alright, so this is kind of where I actually got stuck because I actually have to, like, move things around. Because if you guys remember, at the end of Guardians, Jack and Helen broke up and Olsen and Jenny broke up. So now we're switching them over. So this is kind of where I was working on it and was like, you know what? Bleh, I'll work on it later during one of the streams. Oh well. We're good, Ozzy. Just a bit dusty. We're good, Ozzy. Just a bit dusty. Jenny coughed as she stood, brushing off her newly finished Anna's of Sapphire, a fitted sleeveless blouse with a long blue skirt embroidered with a golden phoenix on the front. Oh. With a brush of her hand, she checked the string of her bow, the metis slung across her back. Okay, so this I'm going to leave here. Because... Okay, so what I'm going to do is... Okay, leave it there. Seems kind of fancy for armor, doesn't it? Master Jenny? Antonia asked. Brushing the dirt off. Brushing the dirt off her armor. It is just a little, but it's actually pretty comfortable, Jenny answered. Oof. Her hand brushing the... Okay, so we're gonna get rid of this. Okay, there we go. I want to take this out and put it brushing her new cross. No, come on. I can type, I swear. Crossbow. Across a crow hanging from her belt. Okay, so we'll go... Nope. We're gonna go like this. There we go. Okay, let's see. All right. Checks. Okay. So we're going to skip this blue thing over here because I'm going to be putting it in a different spot. Well, I like it a lot, Jack said as he walked up behind her, flicking his hands up to swing back the long blades of his white-fanged knucklers, and put his arms around her waist. His new white marquini suit reflected the sunlight. Sunlight. Let's see. Okay. His new white marquini suit reflected the sunlight like a mirror, and a red bandana tied down his unruly spiky hair, decorated with small silver chains and beads. Tiny, okay. You're not so bad yourself. Okay. Yourself? No. Yourself. There we go. You're not so bad yourself. We should get back to Herbtown. I hear Matthew and Lillian brought back some info about these cannons from Omega sector. About these cannons. Okay. Oh wait, that was Olsen, so I can. I hear Matthew and okay. So I want to change this to Lily Ann. Have brought back some information pertaining about what these cannons are from Omega sector. Okay. Okay, I see. Olsen said, sporting his new Fire Osafa. Okay, so wide red leather belts. Hung across his waist, wrist, and shoes. Okay. And shoes. Wide red leather belts and heavy buckles hung across his waist, wrists, and shoes, with one belt wrapped around his head adorned with a gold buckle. One belt around his head adorned with a gold buckle. On his hand was the caster, a black metal sleeve having a solid gold dragon with glaring ruby eyes wrapping its body around it. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this. Okay. The group ran back to the skiff boat. Okay. Called an airboat. Quickly traveling to Herbtown within an hour, where Matthew, Lillian, and we'll say Helen instead because Jenny's here, so Helen. About, okay. Okay, so I need a comma there. So what did you find out? Jack asked, as he and the others walked up to the dining table. Matthew had donned the blackened Commodore armor, the large spaulders and tassets decorated with fine gold leaf designs. Intricate gold leaf designs. Okay. Not much more than what we already know, except for the mana frequencies the cannons are supposedly tuned to. Mana frequency they are supposedly tuned to. The more I think about it, the more confusing it gets. Why would the Black Mage need something with so much power? Lillian asked. Okay, so Lily Ann shrugged. All right. It troubles me as well. Okay, so no, this is Helen speaking. It troubles me as well. There is the Oblivion Gauntlet itself. The Grace Gears. As well as the massive amount of mana he's been draining from the land, Helen mused. Until the pirate lord walked up to them, crossing his arms over his chest and peeking at them from under his hat, pulled low over his eyes, but just... pulled low over his eyes, and resting on his bushy white mustache. No one could see his eyes from under his hat. Pulled the... from under his hat, resting on his bushy white mustache. I hate to interrupt ye thinkin', Storm, but there be a problem with the liquids these pandas be makin', he told them, motioning over to a pot of herbal paste that had been sitting in the sun. Okay, so... Okay, so... Okay, so actually what we're going to do is we're going to put this here. Admiring her new onyx fury. A black dress fitted very close to her upper body. Briefly. Admiring... Oh, did I spell that wrong? Yep, I sure did. Onyx fury. With a crest of maple leaves embroidered on the front. It was also on the flowing gold hyphen lined sleeves, then flowed out in a draping hoop skirt. Okay, so we can get rid of that. And I can get rid of this. Okay. Yeah, I can get rid of this because it just doesn't really add to anything. Alright, then we can get rid of this. Okay. Alright, so hopefully that'll work everything out. Alright, he told them, motioning over to a pot of herbal paste that had been herbal paste sitting in the sun. From inside the pot, arms and legs had sprouted, wriggling around while a strange eye peered out. From another broken piece near the rim. Okay, so motioning. What is that thing? Antonia asked. Reaching, come on. Reaching back for an arrow. I'm not really sure. Okay, so what's going on? Okay, I'm gonna get rid of it. I'm not sure. There was a slight breeze, then all the pastes and medicinal salves we were making began walking around. One of the pandas replied. Okay. Began walking around. Okay. One of the pandas replied. Helen held her chin between her thumb and index finger, thinking what it could be when something caught her eye. Wait, is this... She held her palm to the pot as a faint bluish-white glow gathered in her hand, while a black eye with wings formed in her palm. Okay. Dispel! She shouted as the pot began... Okay. As the pot lit up with the same bluish-white glow, wriggling and bubbling as the glow sank into it, and then went still. No sooner had the pot stopped shaking... No sooner had the shaking stopped than the pot began shaking and squirming again, breaking free of the pandas, and is holding it and running at Helen. No, you don't, Olsen said, sliding between Helen and the pot. Oh no, we'll keep it with Jack, because that's... We'll just leave him be the one to do it, because he's the one that's brash, and, he'll just do stuff. Oh, too late. All right. No, Jack growled, sliding between Helen and the pot. cocking back the hammer on his Peacemaker revolver. It responded with an enormous roar as flames burst from the barrel and incinerated it. Jack, I was hoping we could attempt to find out what had taken over the salves. Oh, I hoped we could find out what had taken over the salves. The slaves? No. No, not the slaves. The salves, you know, kind of like ointments. There we go. All right. Helen hollered, firmly setting her staff on the ground. Sorry, but the thing was charging. Do you expect me to do nothing? Calm down, Jack. We just need you to think a little further ahead next time. Besides, it looks like those things are getting more and more aggressive. Getting increasingly aggressive. Matthew. Okay. Pointed out. Watching some of the recruits trying hard to push back an advancing army of pots and jars, but with little or no luck. That's Helen. Watching some of the recruits try hard to push back an advancing army of pots and jars with little or no luck. As Helen offered her analysis. As Helen analyzed. Helen thought and offered a theory. There we go. There was some kind of magic at work here. However, I would need a spell of a much higher caliber to dispel it. My normal dispelling method doesn't seem to work on this one. Okay, so we'll say Olsen did this. Thought Olsen tried to think of how the game Maplestory and Osiria were similar in this case. In the game, if I remember correctly, Captain Huang said that a monster had taken over the stuff inside the jars and was using it to create havoc with the herb town. Okay, using it to create havoc in Herb Town. But Helen says that it's some kind of magic at work. Maybe it's a magical monster? Is it possible for a creature to be made purely of magic? Olsen asked, unsure of how the question would sound coming from him. Helen thought for a moment, searching her ever-expanding mind for what... Ever-expanding mind. We're going to just cut that out of there because we don't need it anymore. It is possible, but it would require a great deal of power to perform something of this scale. Okay, so we'll leave that alone. The only ones close to that kind of power are Grendel or Alcaster. She explained as Jenny... Oops. As Jenny and Lillian broke... Jenny and Lillian went to help their juniors fight off the advancing armies. Left. To help their juniors fight off the advancing army. This may take some time, but it just may work. But it may just work. Olson, do you remember the quest within the game for finding Minerva's spellbook? To find Minerva's spellbook? Matthew asked. Okay. Matthew asked. Olson rolled his eyes and nodded. How could I forget? That quest was such a royal pain in the... Yes, we all know. Okay, so the quest I'm referring to here is called In Search of the Ancient... I think it's called In Search of the Ancient Book or something like that. Where there is a guy named Alcaster in the town of El Nath that is below Orbis. It's kind of like a winter wonderland kind of town, but he is looking. In search of the book of Ancient. That's what it's called. He is searching for that book, and it was like a 10-part quest that had like 3 other subquests that bled into it. Holy moly, was that thing a monster to do? The thing that made it the hardest to do was the fact that you needed these things called crystals, which they're related to what's in the story, but not like 100%, not the way I've portrayed them. Anyways, you needed to get power crystals, dex crystals, wisdom crystals, and luck crystals, and you needed to give 2 of each to the, at the time, 4 masters. There was Dances with Balrog, there was Dark Lord, there was Athena Pierce, and then there was Grendel the Really Old. The problem was, getting the crystals isn't actually that hard, but it's getting the ore that you needed to make the crystals. Oh boy, that was a nightmare and a half. Because I believe you needed like... I can't remember how many you needed. I think you needed something like... I think you needed 5... Maybe it was even 6 ore in order to make 1 crystal. So you needed to like hunt monsters around. And at the time, at least I did complete it once. At the time, you actually needed to get the ore from a chance drop from monsters. And it was just a stupidly low chance. You couldn't go anywhere. Like, now they have the harvesting mechanic to where you can... out in the world, you have... I think you have, like, legendary veins and legendary... You have heartstones, legendary herbs, and, you know, you have a few things in the world that give you just, like, a big chunk of things. And then you could also go to Ardent Mill to gather your ores and your herbs as you need them. Still a chance of like what exactly you get, but it's nowhere near as hard as it used to be. So then when you get the ores, then you had to take them to a refiner who lived in Ludibrium. I want to say there was a chance it would actually fail. So if it did fail, then you have to go get more ore to make another crystal. I think it was like a 5% chance or something like that it would fail in making it. But still, you know, there was a chance that it would fail. So you always had to get like 1 or 2 extra crystals worth of ore just to make sure that, you know, if it did fail, you know, you're stuck. So then once you got all the crystals, then you had to go to each individual master and ask for a piece of a map that... like when put together, created like one big map and showed where exactly you are, where the book was located. But when you found the statue that this book was located in, then you found that this statue had a key to open like a little hidden secret drawer that was in the base of this statue. Well, it turns out that key was part of another quest that you had to find a keepsake of somebody from their grave and basically grave rob this little tiny ring from somebody's grave, and then use that ring to sit into a little slot on the bottom of the statue, and that was the key to unlock the drawer, which you get the book to take it to Alcaster. Oh boy, it was just a nasty, nasty quest. I mean, and I think even it led into another just massively long or massively hated quest that was in Orbis, where you had to get I can't even remember what it was. There was one thing you had to get in order to, like, you had to, oh, I know what it was. It was like a chain of quests that led part of this. You had to go to somebody, one NPC in Orbis who needed one thing. So you had to go to another NPC to ask for that thing. But that NPC needed something else. And in order to get that something else, you had to go to a third NPC. And in order for that NPC to give you what they needed, they wanted something else. So then you had to go to a fourth NPC who would only give you what you needed if you get him basically what amounted to a boba tea. But it had to be a very specific boba tea. One that was very difficult to get to. You needed Nepenthe seeds. You needed dark Nepenthe seeds. And you needed this stuff called Nepenthe honey, which at the time, again, was notoriously hard to get. The seeds weren't all that hard, but they were so ridiculously hard that you needed to talk to this fairy in Orbis named Erickson, who's just absolutely in love with this little black cat of his. Oh, I know what it was. Okay. So, somebody Green. I can't remember. Alphonse Green. That's the kid's name. Oh, just thinking about it makes my head hurt. Okay. So, Alphonse Green wanted this drink, and only somebody named Elma knew how to make it the way he likes it. And in order to make it, you needed Nepenthe juice and Nepenthe honey. You need to get the Nepenthe honey, which was a nightmare to get in the first place. And in order to get the Nepenthe juice, you had to get the seeds squeezed. But only one fairy in all of Orbis was strong enough to squeeze the seeds. But in order to have the seeds squeezed, you had to get a collection of star, moon, and sun badges from the fairies that exist in, or from the pixies, from the pixies that exist in Orbis, to make a little collar for his little cat. So you get all the emblems, you make, and another thing. Then you had to take those pieces to another NPC in town to make them into a little collar, so that you could take them to Erickson, so he could put it on the cat, so he could squeeze the seeds, so you could take the juice to Elma, who would make this smoothie thing that Alphonse Green liked. Then you take it to Alphonse Green, then he gives you the thing you need. It was just and this was all just like one stage in finding the Book of Ancient. Oh, it was just it was a nightmare of a quest. I do believe it still exists in the game, but it's nowhere near as hard. I think it's like a 4-step quest or something like that for In the Search of Book of Ancient or something like that. It might even be like 6 steps, but it's nowhere near as hard. And also the Alphonse Green quest also exists, but it's basically just, do this, basically go to Erickson. I think you just go to Erickson and have him squeeze the juice out, and then take it to Elma to make the juice, and then you're done. That's it. It's like a 2-step quest. Ugh, it's so much easier now. But back in the day, I did complete it. I think I was maybe... I don't know how many people actually did complete it, but I know out of the friends that I had, I was probably the only one who actually completed it. At least that version of it. So anyways, that's the whole backstory on that. All right. Yes, we all know. What if there's another dispelling method within that book? If I remember right, it should be within the statue about halfway up the Orbis Tower, Matthew interrupted. And the first person we need to see is Alcaster. He should know for sure where we need to begin. Jack and Jenny. Do that while the rest of us will stay here and hold off these things, Matthew called, as he drew his Fraute. Fraut? Or Fraute? I'm not sure. Fraut from his belt with a satisfying ring and charged into battle. Olsen, Ozzy, Eris, Antonia, and Nathan close behind. Jenny and Jack returned to the dock and their airboat when Corinne tossed a bag of supplies in. Aren't you on guard duty? Jack asked as he watched his mom board the boat. Not today. I'm tired of being stuck here all the time with you while you guys go out and have all the fun, she laughed, throwing the sack aside and untying the boat. Jack shook his head as he guided the small craft away from the dock and into the sky, heading for El Nath, where their journey would begin. Okay. All right. There we go. That's a little better. Do. Glug, 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 glug. Oh, sorry about that. I'm just checking something over here on my side. Sorry about that. I'm just checking something over here on my side. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it's good. Hopefully it's good. By levels over here on my side and everything seems okay, but that is yet to be seen. So hopefully everything will work okay. All right. Scene change. Checky dropped the wrench for the 17th time to the floor and growled. Oh, no. We'll get rid of that to the floor thing. 17th time and growled, clambering down the arm of his biped machine, picking up the wrench and clambering back up the 9 feet. Clambering back up the 9 feet to the shoulder of the mecha once more. Don't you think you should put a tether on that thing? Belle called as she walked over to him and threw up a small rope. As she approached, threw up a small rope. Belle, you're a genius, he laughed, tying the rope to the wrench and then to his belt loop. So, what are you working on over here? Shouldn't this thing be up and running by now? Belle called, looking up at him from her vantage point. It is, but the right shoulder still needs a bit of calibrating. calibrating, Checky grunted as he tightened down a huge 1.5-inch nut. For the international audience, give me just a second here. We shall be right back as I check something. Okay, so for the international audience, that's about 38 millimeters. Just a little over 38 millimeters. Okay, clicking the button over there, clicking the button over here, button over here. There we go. Ah. Okay. There. Now let's see if that does it. He called. Jumping down into the cockpit between the arms of the reconditioned drill mecha. It looked like a 10-foot tall headless mechanical person. Checky's legs slid into braces suspended above the floor, the cockpit floor, while he tightened the restraining harness, flipping switches on the control board. Gauges came to life as a mechanical voice named off various checks. Checky snaked his arms into braces similar to the ones on his legs, slipping his fingers into glove-like hands at the ends. Rue generator operational. Beginning status checks. Status check. Mana tanks at 100%. Beginning the status checks. Oh. Okay, so we're going to do that. Okay, so my music has ended. So what I'm going to do... Okay, so I'm moving on to the next video in the playlist. Oops. Give me a second here. Oops. Okay, so I'm listening to the next video in the playlist. It's up there in the chat right now. It's called Thunder Warrior, The Power of Epic Music. And it's by Skypea Journey. So if you want to listen along with me, you are more than welcome to. Okay. Mana tanks at 100%. Balance matrix showing green. Operational angle at 3.5 degrees initiated. Okay, so we're going to do this. Balance matrix showing green. Operational angle of 3.5 degrees positive initiated. Generator and mana tank showing green. Beginning nanosync. Okay, dismiss this because it's a mechanical voice. Dismiss that. Beginning nanosync. A mechanical female voice said. That's sounding an awful lot like Claudine. Charge igniter. Begin startup sequence and disengage safeties. Check it commanded. Huge clamps on the sides of the mecha Okay, massive clamps. Okay. Massive clamps on the sides of the mecha hissed steam and dislodged from the sides as they pulled back, letting the machine take its weight, while a rising growl could be heard. Echoed through the garage. A puff of blue fire from the exhaust flared on its back, aimed downwards. Mana hydraulic system holding steady. Pressure within normal tolerances. Radar check complete and online. Nano sync complete. Awaiting standby disengage command. Standby disengage. Lima Oscar 269er. The machine jolted for a moment as the computer went silent. Checky pulled up his hands in a boxing stance as the machine's arms did the same. He took a step forward, swinging his arms through different moves, walking around the garage as though he were an actual, bigger version of himself. He stepped forward, okay. Mainframe, start training course, Tango Lima Oscar 1. A door opened to the side of the garage, where a few training robots waited. Bell stood just outside the door to watch. As soon as he stepped into the room, it came alive with whines and clicks as the robots followed after Checky like ants to a picnic. Checky's machine quickly ran and jumped over them, the ground shaking as he landed, and then held up his arm. The machine following his every Bleh. Checky's machine quickly ran and jumped over them, the ground shaking as he landed, and then held up his arm, the machine following every move. The forearm split as a small three-barreled machine gun rose from the hole, spinning up... No. Erupting into a hailstorm of bullets. Checky then turned around and held up his other arm. Turned around. His other arm... revealing another gun. Sputtering loudly as shell casing jingled on the floor. A small door on the right of the machine's chest rolled down as a massive stream of fire erupted into existence, toasting everything within its reach. Once the firestorm calmed, Checky held up each of his arms again with fire and bullets spraying the room and taking out everything in sight. He looked over the devastation that now lay and walked out of the room over the bodies of the machines, large servos whining and hydraulic pistons hissing with each step. Whoa, talk about overkill! So what's the mana for? I know you said you weren't any good. I know you said you weren't any good at mana manipulation, Bell commented, making sure to stay well out of the way. It's what I used instead of hydraulic fluid. It lasts much longer and doesn't damage the system like the junk fluid we're given to run the junk fluid we're given. Let's see. Engage standby mode. Like our junk hydraulic fluid. Engage standby mode. The mech pulled its shoulders back and stood to attention while the engines sounded like they went to a higher RPM. So what's with the nano connection I heard the computer say? Belle asked, feeling like a little kid asking question after question. Chucky rocked his head back and put up a finger. Ah, that. Let me get rid of this. Ah, that. Before I made the control system, I had the Omega sector send me a few vials of their nanites. I injected those into myself, which allows me to sync with the computer and change modes quicker than voice commands or switches on control sticks. This way, I can just think it rather than try and remember what one button does out of 50 does. Belle was impressed. Belle was impressed. Checky not only made her a sturdy crossbow, but also made crossbow. What's going on here? But also, Checky made her a sturdy crossbow and the arrow turrets and the saddle for her panther. Darren came walking in, soot covering his face after practicing the magic techniques. After practicing his magic techniques. He was also getting used to the mace-like wand Checky had made for him, which included a small mana tank at the top of the wand. Made of highly refined rue. Okay. All right. Let's see, what time is it? It's 9 o'clock. Okay. Okay. At the rate we're going, we should have a strong enough force to rush the mines and free all the laborers in there, Darren shouted, swinging his wand around excitedly as Checky and Belle laughed in agreement. Claudine smiled as she composed a message for their outside supplier, asking for more parts so they could outfit more of the mechs like Checky's.